The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty plains of Ravalon 3, a forgotten mining planet on the outer rim of human-controlled space. Lieutenant Arlen Voss stood at the observation post, squinting through reinforced binoculars at the distant horizon where heat waves distorted the barren landscape. Behind him, the small outpost that housed Echo 7's squad hummed with the familiar sounds of military routine, maintenance checks, weapons calibration, and the occasional burst of laughter from the mess hall. "Any movement, Lieutenant?" Sergeant Jax approached, his weathered face impassive as always. The sergeant was Echo 7's rock, steady, dependable, unmovable. "Nothing but dust devils and rock formations," Arlen replied, lowering the binoculars. "The exovars have been quiet for 3 days now. Too quiet." The exova conflict had dragged on for 7 years, a brutal interplanetary war between the Human Alliance and the Alien Coalition known for their psychological warfare tactics. Echo 7 was stationed at this remote outpost as a forward detection unit, meant to provide early warning of exovar movement in this sector. They were effectively isolated. Reinforcements were 2 weeks away at best, and communications had been spotty for the past month. "Supply drops late again," Jax noted, his voice betraying no emotion. "Commands stretched thin. We're not exactly priority." Arlen's pragmatism was his defining trait. He had risen through the ranks, not through bold heroics, but through consistent, rational decision-making. His squad respected him for it, even if they sometimes joked about his regulation handbook brain. Echo 7 consisted of 12 soldiers, each selected for their resilience and self-sufficiency. Carter Doodle Lynn was their sniper, a quiet man with an artist's eye and surgeon's hands. Miranda Kess ran communications, a technical genius who could coax a signal from the most stubborn equipment. The others were a mix of infantry specialists, tech experts, and one medic, Tarek Nouri, whose calm demeanor had saved lives more than once. That evening, as the binary suns of the Ravalon system dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Arlen was completing his daily report when Miranda burst into the command center. "Lieutenant, we've got activity on the northern perimeter. Multiple heat signatures moving fast." Arlen was on his feet instantly. "Sound the alert. All personnel to battle stations." The outpost came alive with movement. Soldiers rushed to defensive positions, weapons were checked, and sensors recalibrated. Arlen joined Carter at the northern observation point. "I count 7 vehicles, moving in a staggered formation," Carter reported, his eye never leaving his scope. "Classic exovar approach pattern." "Why now?" Arlen muttered. "They've been quiet for months in this sector." The answer came sooner than expected. The approaching vehicles suddenly stopped 2 kilometers out, just beyond the range of Echo 7's defensive weaponry. Then, without warning, they launched what appeared to be canisters high into the atmosphere. "Gas!" Arlen shouted into his comm. "Everyone, masks on, now!" But it was too late. The canisters burst high above the outpost, releasing a fine, silvery mist that descended rapidly, carried by the evening breeze. The outpost's filtration system, designed for the harsh Ravalon atmosphere, didn't register it as a threat. Within minutes, the air inside the outpost was saturated. The effects were subtle at first. Arlen noticed colors seemed more vibrant, sounds more distinct. Then came a sense of disconnection, as if he were observing himself from a slight distance. Around him, his squad reported similar experiences. "I feel strange," Miranda said, her usual precise diction slurring slightly. "Like my thoughts are expanding." Tarek, the medic, was already running tests on himself and others. Pupils dilated, heart rate elevated, but not dangerously so. Some kind of neurological agent. "Is it lethal?" Arlen demanded, fighting to maintain his focus. "Doesn't appear to be," Tarek replied, studying his medical tablet. It's targeting higher brain functions, but not in a way I've seen before. Not suppressing them, it's almost like it's enhancing certain pathways. Over the next few hours, the true nature of the gas, which they would later learn was called F-theta, became apparent. It didn't incapacitate them as expected. Instead, it altered their thought patterns in profound and unexpected ways. Logic remained, but it was no longer constrained by conventional pathways. Ideas flowed freely. Connections formed between seemingly unrelated concepts, and inhibitions about impossible solutions faded away. Carter was the first to embrace the change. The usually reserved sniper began sketching frantically, covering the walls of the tactical room with intricate drawings, interconnected patterns that, upon closer inspection, revealed themselves to be a completely reimagined defense grid for the outpost. "See, we've been thinking linearly," he explained, his eyes wide and intense. "The exovars expect us to defend in concentric circles, hardening as you move inward. But what if we defend in fractal patterns instead?" His hands moved across the drawings, each section independent but connected, each able to collapse and reform based on pressure points, like a living organism, not a fortress. Arlen stared at the drawings, his altered mind processing the implications. Under normal circumstances, he would have dismissed such a radical departure from established tactics. But now, it made perfect sense. "We'd need to reconfigure our sensor array," Miranda chimed in, already typing commands into her console. "Create false readings, ghost signals that appear and disappear. Make them think we're everywhere and nowhere." Within hours, Echo 7 had completely transformed their defensive posture. Equipment was repurposed in ways that would have horrified their manufacturers. Environmental sensors were modified to emit frequencies that interfered with exovar scanning technology. The very dust of Ravalon 3 was collected and treated with chemicals from the medical bay to create a compound that, when dispersed, created thermal illusions that confused enemy targeting systems. When the exovars launched their ground assault at dawn, they encountered not the standard human alliance defense they had expected, but a bewildering array of false signals, moving heat signatures, and defensive positions that seemed to shift and relocate constantly. "They're pulling back," Carter reported from his new sniper nest, a position he had insisted on creating by hanging a camouflaged platform from the outpost's water tower, a location so exposed and obvious that the exovars had dismissed it as a potential threat point. "Keep the pressure on," Arlen ordered. "Trigger the dust fields in sectors 3 and 5. The retreating exovar forces found themselves engulfed in clouds of treated dust that adhered to their vehicles' sensor arrays, creating persistent ghost readings that would take days to clear completely. By midday, the immediate threat had passed. Echo 7 had not only survived, but had effectively repelled a force 3 times their size without a single casualty. As the squad gathered in the command center, there was a palpable sense of exhilaration mixed with disbelief. "What just happened?" Sergeant Jacks asked, the only one who seemed somewhat disturbed by their success. He had been affected by F-theta less than the others, his mind naturally resistant to external influence. "We won," Miranda said simply, her eyes still dilated, her movements quick and bird-like. "Using tactics that violated at least 7 Alliance military protocols," Jax pointed out. "Protocols designed for conventional warfare," Arlen countered. "This wasn't conventional." Later that evening, as the effects of F-theta began to slightly diminish, Arlen established communication with Alliance Command. The transmission was delayed and fragmented, but he managed to report the attack and their successful defense. The response was immediate and unexpected. "Echo 7, you are ordered to prepare for immediate extraction. A medical team is being dispatched to your location. Estimated arrival, 7 days. Maintain quarantine protocols until their arrival." Arlen stared at the message, a sense of unease growing within him. He gathered his squad and shared the orders. "They think we're compromised," Tarek said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "They want to study us. not help us. The gas is still in our system, Miranda added, and likely in our environment. We'll be experiencing its effects for days, maybe weeks. Arlen made a decision that, in his previous mental state, would have been unthinkable. We're not leaving. Not yet. The Exovars will be back. Probably with a larger force. Command can't get reinforcements here in time. We're the only defense this sector has. Are you suggesting we disobey a direct order? Lieutenant? Jax asked, his expression unreadable. I'm suggesting we reinterpret it. Arlen replied carefully. We'll prepare for extraction, as ordered, but we'll also prepare for the next attack, and we'll use every advantage we have, including our current state of mind. Over the next week, Echo 7 threw themselves into preparations with a fervor that bordered on obsession. Their minds, still affected by F-Theta, generated solutions to problems they hadn't even articulated yet. Carter's tactical drawings evolved into three-dimensional models that predicted enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. Miranda developed communication protocols that seemed to border on prescience, anticipating information needs before they arose. Even Sergeant Jax, initially resistant, found himself drawn into their altered way of thinking. It's not that the gas makes you smarter, he observed one evening. It just removes the filters. The ones that tell you that won't work before you've even tried it. 7 days after the initial attack, 2 significant events occurred simultaneously. The Alliance medical extraction team entered the Ravelon system, and the Exovars returned, this time with a force that outnumbered Echo 7 by more than 10 to 1. They've adapted to our previous tactics, Carter reported grimly. Multiple approach vectors, specialized scanning equipment to cut through our interference. Then we evolve, Arlen replied. During the past week, he had fully embraced the creative freedom that F-Theta provided. His normally regulation-bound mind now saw military doctrine as a starting point rather than an end point. It's time for the Phantom Matrix. The Phantom Matrix was a defense concept that had emerged from one of their collective brainstorming sessions, a comprehensive battlefield illusion that didn't just create false signals, but an entire false narrative of the battle itself. It required perfect coordination and timing, with each squad member playing a specific role in maintaining the illusion. As the Exovar forces approached, Echo 7 initiated the first phase. Rather than attempting to hide their presence, they amplified it, creating the impression of a much larger defensive force through strategically placed equipment that mimicked Alliance signatures. They're slowing their advance, reassessing, Miranda reported from the communications center, where she monitored the Exovar communications she had managed to partially decrypt. Good. Spring the first trap, Arlen ordered. A series of controlled detonations erupted across the approach plane, not designed to cause damage, but to create specific dust patterns that the Exovar's sensors would interpret as a minefield. As expected, the enemy forces diverted along the paths Echo 7 had predicted and prepared for. The battle that followed was unlike anything Alliance tactical manuals had ever described. Echo 7 created a constantly shifting defensive perimeter, appearing to retreat in some sectors while holding firm in others, all the while laying the groundwork for the next phase of deception. The Exovars, increasingly frustrated by their inability to establish a clear picture of the battlefield, committed more resources to breaking through what they perceived as the weakest point in Echo 7's defense, a perception carefully cultivated by Arlen's team. They've taken the bait, Carter announced, moving their command vehicle into position. Execute final phase, Arlen commanded. The culmination of the Phantom Matrix was a masterpiece of tactical deception. Echo 7 simultaneously deactivated all their decoys and false signatures while activating a series of powerful jammers that temporarily blinded the Exovar's sensor systems. In that moment of confusion, the squad launched their only true offensive action, a precisely targeted strike at the enemy command vehicle. The Exovars, suddenly unable to distinguish real threats from imagined ones, and with their command structure disrupted, fell into disarray. What should have been an overwhelming force became a collection of uncoordinated units, each responding to different perceived threats. By the time the Alliance medical team's ship entered Ravalon 3's atmosphere, the battle was over. The Exovars had retreated, leaving behind damaged vehicles and equipment that would cripple their operations in this sector for months. Dr. Celine Rao, the neurologist who led the medical team, was not prepared for what she found at the outpost. Instead of a squad of incapacitated soldiers suffering from chemical warfare, she discovered Echo 7 in the midst of a detailed debriefing session, analyzing their successful defense with methodical precision, albeit with occasional tangents that veered into philosophical discussions about the nature of perception and reality. "Lieutenant Voss?" she asked, entering the tactical room where the walls were covered with Carter's intricate drawings. "Dr. Rao," Arlen acknowledged, his eyes bright but focused. "Welcome to Echo 7. The medical team immediately began conducting examinations, taking blood samples, and monitoring brain activity. Dr. Rao's initial concern gave way to scientific fascination as she documented the effects of F-theta. "This agent doesn't impair cognitive function as we would expect from a neurotoxin," she explained during a briefing with Arlen and Sergeant Jax. "Instead, it appears to temporarily reduce activity in the brain's filtering mechanisms, particularly those that suppress creative connections in favor of established patterns. It makes us think outside the box," Arlen simplified. "Dramatically so," Dr. Rao confirmed. "But there are potential long-term risks. Prolonged exposure could lead to difficulty in distinguishing between practical creative solutions and less practical ones. Some subjects might experience persistent perceptual alterations." "You mean we could stay like this?" Jax asked, his tone making it clear he considered this a negative outcome. "To some degree, yes. Which is why Command wants all of you returned to Alliance space immediately for comprehensive treatment." Arlen exchanged glances with his squad members, a silent communication passing between them. Over the past 2 weeks, they had developed an almost intuitive understanding of each other's thoughts, another side effect of their shared F-theta experience. "With respect, Doctor," Arlen said carefully, "we would like to propose an alternative. This isn't a negotiation. Lieutenant, I have orders." "So did we," Arlen countered. "To defend this sector, which we've done successfully against overwhelming odds, using methods that no conventional Alliance force could have developed. Methods born from a chemically altered state of mind," Dr. Rao pointed out. "Yes, and that altered state has saved not just our lives but potentially the entire sector. The Exovars' supply lines have been disrupted, their command structure in disarray. We've accomplished more as 12 compromised soldiers than a battalion could have using standard tactics." Dr. Rao's expression remained stern, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A controlled study. Here, in the field. Monitor us. Document the effects of F-theta. Develop protocols for its safe use. But let us continue our mission." "You're suggesting we weaponize this agent? Use it deliberately?" "I'm suggesting we recognize its value as a tactical enhancer, not just a threat," Arlen clarified. "The Exovars thought they were deploying a weapon to incapacitate us. Instead, they gave us a tool. Shouldn't we understand it fully before discarding it?" The debate continued for days. Dr. Rao conducted more tests, interviewed each squad member, and reviewed the tactical innovations Echo 7 had developed. She was torn between her scientific interest in F-theta's unique properties and her concern for the squad's long-term health. Meanwhile, Alliance Command grew increasingly insistent that Echo 7 be extracted immediately. The implications of soldiers operating under the influence of an enemy chemical agent, regardless of the apparent benefits, raised troubling questions about control and protocol. The situation reached a critical point when long-range sensors detected another Exovar fleet entering the system, this one larger than any previous force deployed to Ravalon 3. "They're determined to neutralize us now," Arlen told his squad during an emergency briefing. "We've become more than just an irritant. We're a threat to their entire campaign in this sector. The extraction ship can't outrun those vessels," Miranda added, her fingers dancing across her console as she tracked the approaching enemy. "If we try to leave now, we'll be intercepted." Dr. Rao, who had been observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Then it seems we have no choice but to remain and face them." "We?" Arlen raised an eyebrow. "My team and I can't leave either, and since we're staying, we might as well make ourselves useful." She hesitated, then added, "I've been authorized to use my discretion regarding your treatment. Given the circumstances, I believe the best course of action is to document your methods while providing medical support." What followed was a period of intense preparation unlike anything in Alliance military history. Echo 7, their minds still enhanced by the lingering effects of F-Theta, collaborated with Dr. Rao's medical team to refine their unconventional tactics. The doctor's scientific perspective helped them articulate and systematize their intuitive leaps, creating a framework that could potentially be taught to others. The Exovars arrived 3 days later, their fleet positioning itself in high orbit while ground forces established a perimeter around the outpost. Their intention was clear: total elimination of Echo 7 and any evidence of F-Theta's effects. What they couldn't know was that Echo 7 had transformed the entire region into what Carter called a symphony of deception. Every aspect of the environment had been modified or repurposed to serve their defense. The very dust contained microscopic reflective particles that created false thermal signatures. Underground steam vents had been reconfigured to release in patterns that mimicked movement. Even the local wildlife, hardy lizard-like creatures that inhabited the rocks, had been conditioned to gather in locations that would trigger Exovar proximity sensors. The battle began at dawn, with an orbital bombardment meant to soften Echo 7's defenses, but the outpost that the Exovars targeted was largely empty, a shell containing just enough equipment to register as occupied on their sensors. The real Echo 7 had dispersed into a network of smaller positions, connected by Miranda's innovative communication system that used the planet's natural electromagnetic anomalies to hide their signals. "They're committing their ground forces," Arlen observed from his hidden command post. "Exactly as predicted. The Exovar ground assault moved with precision and overwhelming force, but against an enemy that existed primarily in their perception. Echo 7 had created what they called the Ghost Dance, a coordinated series of appearances and disappearances across the battlefield that made it impossible for the enemy to establish a clear target. For hours, the Exovars chased phantoms, expended ammunition on decoys, and gradually lost cohesion as a fighting force. Their frustration was evident in their increasingly erratic movements and communications, which Miranda continued to intercept and analyze. "Their command structure is breaking down," she reported. "They can't agree on what they're seeing or how to respond." "Perfect," Arlen replied. "Initiate the convergence." The convergence was the final phase of their defense, a carefully orchestrated collapse of their dispersed positions that created the illusion of a retreating force while actually concentrating their true strength. As the Exovars pursued what they believed was a fleeing enemy, they found themselves drawn into a natural basin where the acoustics and atmospheric conditions severely limited their sensor effectiveness. It was there that Echo 7 launched their counterattack, not with overwhelming firepower, which they didn't possess, but with precisely targeted strikes at communication nodes, sensor arrays, and command vehicles. Within minutes, the Exovar force was effectively blind, deaf, and leaderless. The result was not just a retreat, but a rout. Exovar units, unable to coordinate and increasingly convinced they were facing a much larger Alliance force employing unknown technology, abandoned their equipment and fled to their orbital vessels. As the last enemy ship broke atmosphere, a cheer went up from Echo 7's positions. They had achieved the impossible, twice. In the aftermath, as they regrouped at the original outpost, the full magnitude of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had not just defended a remote outpost. They had fundamentally disrupted the Exovar campaign in the entire sector. Intelligence gleaned from captured equipment revealed that the enemy had committed significant resources to the Ravelon operation, resources that would take months to replace. Dr. Rao, who had observed the battle from the command center, was the first to put it into words. "You've changed the nature of this conflict, not through superior firepower or numbers, but through creativity applied to warfare in a way I've never seen before." Arlen nodded, feeling the effects of F Theta beginning to fade more noticeably now. His thoughts were becoming more linear, more conventional, but the experience had permanently altered his perspective on military doctrine. "The question now," Dr. Rao continued, "is what happens next. Command will want a full report, and they'll want to understand exactly how 12 soldiers defeated an enemy force many times their size. We tell them the truth," Arlen said simply. "That our enemy deployed a weapon that backfired spectacularly. That sometimes the most rigid thinking is the most vulnerable." "And the gas? F Theta? What do we tell them about that?" Arlen looked at his squad, at Carter with his intricate tactical drawings, at Miranda with her innovative communications array, at Tarek, who had developed medical applications no one had previously considered possible. Even Sergeant Jax, initially so resistant to their altered state, now displayed a quiet appreciation for what they had achieved. "We tell them it's a tool, not just a weapon. Like any tool, it can be dangerous if misused, but it can also open doors that we didn't know existed." In the weeks that followed, Echo 7 became something of a legend within Alliance military circles. The Crazy Squad, some called them. Others used terms like the Inspired or the Visionaries. Formal debriefings were conducted, reports filed, and studies initiated on the potential applications of controlled F Theta exposure in military operations. Dr. Rao remained with them, continuing her research while advocating for a nuanced approach to their condition. Total reversal of F Theta's effects may not be possible or even desirable, she argued in her reports to Alliance Medical Command. These soldiers have developed cognitive patterns that, while unconventional, have proven exceptionally effective in combat situations. Our goal should be to stabilize these patterns, not eliminate them. For Arlen, the experience had transformed not just his thinking but his understanding of leadership. He had always seen his role as maintaining order and following protocol. Now he recognized that true leadership sometimes meant embracing chaos, encouraging the unconventional, and trusting in the creative potential of his squad. 6 months after the initial exposure, Echo 7 was officially redesignated as a Special Tactics Unit, given expanded operational autonomy, and assigned to missions that conventional forces had deemed impossible. Their success rate was unprecedented, their methods unorthodox but undeniably effective. The effects of F Theta had indeed diminished over time, but never completely disappeared. Each member of Echo 7 retained certain cognitive alterations: Carter's ability to visualize complex tactical scenarios, Miranda's intuitive understanding of communication patterns, Tarek's innovative medical insights. Even Sergeant Jax, the most resistant to change, found himself more willing to question established doctrine. As for Lieutenant Arlen Voss, he emerged as the perfect bridge between Echo 7's unconventional approaches and the structured military hierarchy they still operated within. He could speak both languages, the creative chaos of his squad and the ordered precision of Alliance command. On the anniversary of their first encounter with F Theta, Arlen sat alone in his quarters, reviewing a tactical manual he had been asked to contribute to. The page before him contained a section titled Adaptive Cognitive Enhancement in Combat Scenarios. He smiled slightly as he wrote the introduction. "The most dangerous assumption in warfare is that your enemy thinks as you do. The most powerful advantage is the ability to think in ways they cannot anticipate. Sometimes, what appears to be madness is simply a different kind of sanity, one that sees pathways invisible to conventional thinking. The pen moved across the page in flowing, slightly erratic lines, a small reminder of the change that had come upon him a year ago. Arlen no longer fought against this occasional drift into unconventional thought patterns. He had learned to value them, to integrate them into his more structured thinking. Outside his window, the harsh landscape of Ravalon 3 stretched to the horizon, no longer an alien environment but a canvas of possibilities. Echo 7 had not just survived here, they had flourished, transforming adversity into advantage. The gas that was meant to incapacitate them had instead revealed capacities they didn't know they possessed. The madness that their enemy had tried to inflict had become their greatest strength. And in that transformation lay a lesson that extended beyond warfare to the very nature of human potential. Sometimes, breaking free of established patterns is not a descent into chaos, but an ascent to a higher order, one that embraces complexity rather than reducing it. As the twin suns of Ravalon set once more, casting long shadows across the outpost that had become their improbable fortress. Arlen closed the tactical manual and joined his squad for their evening meal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to reshape what was possible. And Echo 7 would face them as they had faced everything since that first silver mist descended from the sky, with minds open to impossible solutions and the courage to pursue them.